my name is Helene and I'm here today to bring you my December wrap-up. I read a total of 19 books in December, which is ridiculous. I blame it on my Christmas break. I had a lot of time to read and I enjoyed it. This is going to be a long video. I hope you will enjoy it anyway, and I better get started. Let me start with the two library books that I read in December. The first one of those is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This is also the author who wrote Americana, which I own but I haven't read yet. But I wanted to read this first and I really enjoyed it. This is about a boy called Ugwu, and Ugwu lives in Africa. He is used as a servant for a rich man who is also very intelligent. We then follow him during the civil war in Africa, and it's such an interesting read. I really enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars. I especially loved how this book deals with emotions. You really feel for the character and you feel like you are in the civil war yourself, and that's quite extraordinary and also very frightening. The next library book is Stoner by John Williams. This is a beautiful book. It's basically about a man who didn't have a very interesting life, but even though he's not that interesting when it comes to his life, this was such an interesting read. It must be the writing style or the way his life is presented, I don't know, but it was so good, and I also gave this one 4 stars. Since it was December, I also picked up A Christmas Carol and Other Christmas Writings by Charles Dickens in this beautiful Penguin cloth-bound edition. I enjoyed the first story and A Christmas Carol the most, and I do believe those are related in some way. Charles Dickens wrote the first story in this book before he continued this story and wrote A Christmas Carol, and I could sense that when reading. But I also enjoyed the other stories and it really got me into the Christmas mood, so that was the point of a Christmas book, and I think that this book succeeded. I gave this one 4 stars as well. Then I borrowed a French book from my old French teacher, and that is this one, La Vérité sur l'affaire Harry Quebert by Joel Dicker. In English it would be The Truth About the Harry Quebert Affair. This was an enjoyable read. It is a crime novel, and normally I'm not much into crime, but this one captivated me anyway. I gave it 3 stars because it is a huge novel, and I did feel like it dragged on a little bit too much in some parts. But all in all, such a great story. I have to tell you that the main character is an author and he is writing a novel about this crime. So that really interested me, and yeah. Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats by T.S. Eliot, which is also the smallest book I read this year, I believe. This book consists of poems about cats, and this is the basis for the musical called Cats, so that's quite cool, I think. I really enjoyed it because I love cats, and I actually ended up giving it 4 stars as well because I just really enjoyed it. Then we have 2 books by Haruki Murakami, the first one being The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. This is the first book I read in December actually, and this is the biggest one by him that I've read. And I really enjoyed it. I have a thing about Haruki Murakami. I really admire his way of writing and telling stories. You either hate or you love Haruki Murakami because his writing style is so simplistic and so could turn out a little bit boring at times. I don't think so, but some people do. And also he writes magical realism, which is maybe hard to deal with for some people, but I really enjoy it. The same goes for this book. It was fantastic. It was magical and it wasn't boring. This book has some scenes in it that really make me reflect on life, and I love when books do that to me. Basically, this is a story about a married couple who is not very happy, and we then follow the man who tries to deal with this unhappiness, and some strange things happen to him, I have to say, and that's all I'm going to say. I gave this one 3 stars. We also have South of the Border, West of the Sun by Haruki Murakami. This is a love story between 2 people who were a couple as young children, and then they are split for several years, about 40 years I think. Then they reunite, they are both engaged with other people, I believe, but they reunite and their love rekindles. I gave this one 3 stars as well. This was a fast read, so it was a nice change up from the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle over there. I also managed to read 3 of the books that I received for Christmas, and they were all amazing. The first one is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This one is a children's classic, and it is a coming-of-age story about Cassandra, who lives in this castle with her family. I love this book. This was so amazing. I think what I love about it is that I have a weak spot for coming-of-age stories, and also this was written in a very interesting manner. It is written not like a diary, but like Cassandra is writing in her diary, but with speed writing. So she is an aspiring author, but she also writes in this interesting manner. It's hard to explain, just read it. I really think that people should read this book at least once in their lifetime, and I gave it 4 stars. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. This was interesting because this is so hyped. I couldn't believe it when I picked it up. I had to own it, I had to read it, and I had to see if I liked it for myself. Actually, it turned out that I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it as much as people seem to do. I gave it 3 stars just because it became a bit too exaggerated for my taste. This book has a lot of things in it. It has Victorian aspects, it has symbolism, crime, a love for books, a lot of things. And in my opinion, it just turned into too much of a crime story, and I'm not good at those, and I didn't really enjoy it in the end. I kind of felt like skipping some pages. I didn't do it, but I felt like it, and that's not a good sign. I know I'm going to be quite unpopular now, but I have to be honest, and I do see why people love this book. It does have a lot of things in it, and it is very admirable, and the writing style is also beautiful, but to me it just didn't really captivate me. The Snow Child by Ewan Ivey. Wow, this book was perfection. It was so good. I loved it. I have to reread it next winter. I know that already. This is about a married couple who live in Alaska. They are about 50 years old and they are childless. The woman is very sad about that, and she actually tries to commit suicide in the beginning of the book because she is so depressed. However, one day it starts snowing. They build a snowman just to have a little bit of fun, and that snowman turns into a child, a young girl with the same outfit, the same facial features, and it's just extraordinary. This book was, as I said, perfection. I cannot even explain it. It's both the mood of the book, the way that Ewan Ivey describes snow and winter, and this mood that you get, that's one thing. And also the storyline. I loved the 2 main characters. They are close to my heart. We get to see the story from both points of view, so that means 1 chapter from the woman's point of view, 1 from the husband's, etc, etc. And it really made me connect with both of them. You have to read this book. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Let It Snow by John Green, Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle. This one was enjoyable and it got me in the Christmas mood. I did feel like it became a little bit too sweet and a little bit too cliched, if that's a word. It was okay. I gave it 3 stars, but it wasn't anything spectacular like the Charles Dickens stories. They were extraordinary. This one was okay, but not my favorite Christmas story of all time. The Sense of an Ending by Julian Barnes. This one was the winner of the Man Booker Prize back in 2012, I believe, and it was okay. I will say it wasn't my favorite. It is about a man who has grown old, and he then reflects on his life, and he realizes that some things he remembers wrongly, so it didn't really happen the way he explains it, and that's what makes this book interesting. And I think that's also what makes a lot of people love this book, because I know a lot of people who really love it. I'm just weird. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars, but I had a hard time connecting with the main character, and that's a problem because that's kind of the basis for loving a book, I think. The pile is growing, and that leads me to the second Man Booker Prize winner that I read this month, and that is The Narrow Road to the Deep North by Richard Flanagan. This is the winner of 2014, and this was better, I think. I gave it 4 stars. It deals with Second World War from Australia's point of view, because we follow some men, some Australians who were prisoners of war in Japan, I believe it is, and they had to build this railway. That's a hard word to say. Railway. Yeah, they had to build one of those while being slaves. It's very brutal. If you are not very much into brutal stories, you shouldn't pick up this book. But if you are okay with it, then pick it up. It is so beautiful. It's also mingled with a love story, because the main character has a love affair back in Australia, and it's quite beautiful. And The Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. This one was beautiful. I adored it. It was perfection. Once again, one of those books that just goes straight to your heart. It is about a family who lives in Afghanistan, and I don't know how much I should reveal. Just really read it. It is filled with emotions. It is beautiful, captivating, extraordinary, phenomenal. Do I have to say more? I gave it 5 stars. A Man Called Over by Fredrik Backman. Now, this is quite a different book from And the Mountains Echoed. This is a funny book. The main character is hilarious. He is called over. He is 59 years old. He is a pessimist with a capital P, and I loved him for that. We follow him throughout the book. He tries to commit suicide once and once again, but he is being interrupted once and once again. And that alone is not that funny to me. The thing that really captivated me was his personality. I loved it, and alone for that I would recommend this book. If you have nothing against pessimistic main characters, then maybe this is the book for you, because it's so hilarious and it actually made me laugh, and I gave it 3 stars. The Incredible Pilgrimage of Harold Fry by Rachel Joyce. This is kind of like, if you know the book called The 100-Year-Old Who Crawled Out the Window and Disappeared. This one, they are kind of similar, but with different characters and different stories. This is about Harold Fry, funnily enough, who receives a letter from an old friend who tells him that she is about to die from cancer. She lives in northern England, he lives in southern England, and he decides to walk across England to reach her and say goodbye to her. It did entertain me, and it did make me smile at some points, and I gave it 3 stars. I have 3 more books to go. The third to last one is Wedding Night by Sophie Kinsella, a chick lit book that has been standing on my shelves for the better part of a year. I think I may have grown out of chick lit books, because while I enjoyed this book, I also really despised some parts of it. It was, in my opinion, way too filled with cliches, way too predictable. The funny parts weren't funny at all. While I did enjoy the main story, I didn't really enjoy one of the main characters, which is, as I said earlier, a problem, because that makes it hard for me to love a book. But I did enjoy the other main character, and that's what made me give this book 3 stars, because it was an enjoyable read and it was okay. I think actually I gave it 2.5 stars. So it wasn't my favorite by Sophie Kinsella, but it was okay. It's about to fall over, this thing. Then I read the second novel in Nancy Mitford's complete novels, and this one was called Christmas Pudding, and that's why I read it in December. I enjoyed it, but I didn't like it as much as the first novel, which was called Highland Fling. Christmas Pudding wasn't really that much about Christmas. It was more about a love relationship that is kind of traumatic and fatal, and it was a lot of fun to read. But that's it. The very last book I had to show you is also amongst my favorite of the month, and that is Rue by Emma Donoghue. Let's just take a moment to hug this book, because this exceeded my expectations by 100%. This book was so interesting that it's hard for me to explain. I cannot say much about it other than it deals with a boy who lives in a room with his mother, and that's all I'm going to say, because that's all I knew when I started reading. This book kept me guessing, and it kept me guessing wrong. I loved it. It really makes you reflect on life and how you live your life. I really enjoyed it. Once again, I'm speechless. Some books do that to me, and this is one of those. I obviously gave it 5 stars because this was extraordinary, and it's definitely not going to be the last read by Emma Donoghue. That leads me to the end. This is all of the books that I read in December. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching, and happy reading, everyone. Bye bye.